Something strange is going on at this Women's World Cup at night time. But importantly, we have two different starting times. One is an afternoon game and the other one in the dark. And most of these games have been played after the sun has gone down. And when you watch the second innings of these late games, something is incredibly clear. No one can make any runs under lights. And that is not a normal pattern. The last World Cup in the UAE for the men was in 2021, and batting at night was exactly what you wanted to do. Now it is completely the opposite. And even when teams have chased successfully under lights, the batting has not been particularly good. So what the hell is going on in the dark, in the desert, this World Cup?
This was made using MV Players Insights. The same technology that supports the England and New Zealand test players is available to club cricketers as well.
Let's look at the game so far. In the late game starts, West Indies chased versus Scotland. That was the only time I batted okay under lights, but of course that's a pretty big mismatch, right? England chased poorly versus South Africa. It was never a big task, and South Africa's weak backup bowling let England back in. Plus, there was a pretty bad drop in caps last over in the power play that could have changed things. But there is no doubt that Nat Sciver-Brunt, as brutal a batter as anyone in the world, was never quite in and was timid. And what normally would have been a net run rate blitz was more of a slow burn until the last over. There was another mismatch when England batted first against Bangladesh. However, that was a very weird game. England had really batted poorly in the first innings, but Bangladesh were probably never going to chase that because of Glenn and Eccleston. But it looked a lot tougher than that, and Bangladesh weren't bowled out and yet still didn't make it to 100 runs. Australia played New Zealand, and two interesting things happened here. One was that the Aussies looked like they were about to set about 175-ish total, and then they had a collapse when it suddenly looked like it was really tough to bat on that wicket. But also when New Zealand came out, no one looked like they could hit the ball off the square. Losing to Australia is fine, but New Zealand didn't look like they should even be on the same field at that time. And that is wild, because a game before they had a great upset over one of the other favourites, India. In that one, it was their batting that actually helped them set up the game. Sure, Australia is a better bowling lineup, that's fine. But when the Indian batters went up against a far more limited New Zealand bowling attack, they looked completely out of their depth. And usually I would have just blamed them. But the game before, Pakistan had got over 100, largely down to the fact that Sri Lanka couldn't catch for the last couple of wickets. And it should have been an easy chase, but it looked like early on that the Sri Lankans were chasing 1,000 runs, not 117. Then Sri Lanka played another game at night. They were chasing versus India, and I don't think them making those runs was ever going to be particularly easy. But again, we saw a team that was chasing who were not even in the game. The fact that they got anywhere near 100 looked absolutely mind-blowing. But what is crazy about these first 7 night games is that this is over 2 pitches. Like, this isn't a road deck. It is far more than that. So if you look at women's cricket over the last couple of years, and then you look at this World Cup, you can see that something has changed. Every single team has decided to bat first in these night games. Whereas before, it was very, very common to bowl first. So there is absolutely no doubt that these teams worked out something was up from the first toss across 2 different pitches, and they have been proved absolutely correct. And my first thought was everyone seems to be getting bowled or LBW at the moment. And when you look at the entire tournament, you'll see that bowled and LBW is about 35%. And it's about 31.5%. So it's a slight bump up. But tournament-wise, we haven't seen a lot more balls hitting the pads or hitting the stumps than we normally would. But this did not pass my eye test at all, because I've been watching really slow spinners toss it up massively, and the ball has still been skidding on at certain parts of the game. So there has to be more to it, and there is. This is in the night games. So in the first innings of the night games, we are seeing 30% of the dismissals being bowled and LBW. That goes up to 46.5% when you play the second innings of night games. I mean, you can't look at these two things and say that teams are playing the same cricket in both these games. In one, you bat normally. In the other one, good luck protecting your stumps. Now, it is worth saying that women's cricket has more bowled in general. And a big reason for this is just simply the height of the bowlers. They are shorter, so they keep the stumps in play far more often. And quite a lot of women's spinners especially bowl round arms, so they're just skidding the ball into the stumps over and over again. So in the second innings, my guess is that these pitchers are playing just a little bit faster, which is meaning that ball is skidding on, and we're seeing this massive uptick. But it is worth looking at some of the other factors at play here. Although what this doesn't explain is why, if the dew is coming in, it's enough to make the ball slide, but not enough for the bowlers to struggle with it. But we'll get to that later. One of the reasons we've seen in this World Cup, especially in the night games, more bold in LBW, is the fact that women don't actually catch particularly well under the lights. Many franchise leagues around the world for women are quite often double headers with the men, which means they play in the daytime. And if you look at this graphic from Cricinfo, it will also tell you that women actually play about half as many games as men do under lights. And for those of you who've never played a night game of cricket before, you will understand that almost instantly, the minute that ball is hit up in the air, it is a completely different kind of catching. And even in the men's game, they spend a lot of time preparing at each individual ground and getting ready for it by going out and training. Women don't always get access to night training facilities, quite often because the men are there. So they're not playing as much under lights, they're not training as much under lights, and I suppose most importantly, they're just not catching as much under lights. So when they get to a World Cup, we see extra drops. And also very specifically, the Dubai ground has different lights to pretty much every other ground in the world. It has the Ring of Fire effect, which some people say when they've done a lot of fielding, it actually ends up being easier than the big light towers. But the important thing is, if you've never fielded there before, you still need lots of practice. And there's no doubt that a lot of catches are being dropped in this World Cup. However, everything I just said there explains why there's more LBWs and bolds. So if we look at the first innings of these night games, you will see here that spin and pace are almost identical to each other. They're both coughing up around 22 runs per wicket, and they're going at about 133, 135 run pace, right? Absolutely normal women's cricket. So in the first innings of night matches, everything is absolutely as you would expect. Let's have a look at the second innings. Let's start with spin. We are seeing here that you're going at about 5.5 runs and over. So under a run a ball, so you're struggling to score, and also you're averaging around 17 runs per wicket. But no one is focusing on spin at the moment, because from the minute I put these up, the first thing that everyone would notice is pace bowling. 23 wickets have come to seam bowlers under lights in this World Cup so far, and they are going at less than 5 runs and over. And for those who don't do maths very well, 5 runs and over is a really important mark. That means that when you're facing seam bowling under lights in this World Cup, you are scoring less than 100 runs per innings. 98 if you want to get very technical. And I don't think that is the most dramatic thing on here, because you are also averaging less than 10 runs per dismissal. That is absolute craziness. And all of this follows on from the eye test. In fact, the reason that me and Varun even looked this up in the first place is because I kept thinking, no one can score in these second innings, and everyone seems to be getting bowled and LBW. And very normal, innocuous medium pace seems to be slippery and unpredictable. It is so hard to bat under lights against the seam bowler, and to be honest, it's not that much better to go up against the spinner. But what I really like about this, again, is how different the women's game is to the men's. In the 2021 Men's World Cup, during the Super 12s, it became the great battle of the toss. Every team chose to bat second, and the reason was the dew, which meant that bowling slow balls or spin was almost impossible at times. There were so many wides, and accuracy was just non-existent. That is not what we are seeing in this World Cup. We are seeing almost exactly the opposite. The spinners and seamers are deadly accurate, hence all the LBWs and bolds we are seeing. And when the moisture comes in, it's good luck, not to the bowlers, but to the batters. I mean, just look at the patterns. The patterns don't make any sense. And yes, it is only after 7 games. But what we have seen so far is that it is moist enough for the ball to skid, but not moist enough for it to slip out of your hand and become a full toss or a half tracker or a wide. Like, all the advantage in the moisture is going towards the bowling team, and the batting is getting none of it. Now, it is only 7 games. Maybe things will change. Maybe everything I've said here won't matter in a couple of matches' time. But right at the moment, there is no doubt that this World Cup, batters should be very afraid of batting in the dark. I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories, like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.